the National Security Agency, which is what I was doing.
Okay.
So I just happened to be attached to the North Korea mission. So the analysis that I did was mostly data entry of whatever intelligence was coming in, and then doing various support activities for different leadership commands in different posts around the United States, and in theater, which is in North Korea, Japan, that sort of thing, or South Korea, Japan. So yeah, from 90 to 93 is when I was there. So I mean,
this would have been Kim Jong-il then, right?
Yeah, or was it
but
Kim Il
he
Sung was the grandfather? Kim
Yeah, Kim Il Sung
Kim
was
Jong-il.
the founder,
Kim Sung Un or Kim? Yeah.
and then Kim Jong-il was the father who died in 2012.
Kim Jong Un is now
And
there.
then Kim Jong-un.
So he wasn't sick at that point yet.
But
okay.
you're also
still
dealing with a situation in North Korea. Like, there's again, not to get off subject, but there's a famous atheist named Christopher Hitchens who claims to have been not involved, but like has visited as a journalist the axis of evil power. So that would be like Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And he said it had the most religious feel of any country he's ever been to, in the sense that what the people are told there and the level of propaganda and the level of sort of thought control that they exert on the people in North Korea is such that it's not surprising that this young guy, Kim Jong-un, who's the leader of the country, would begin to believe the hype, so to speak, or the propaganda about himself in relation to his position in the world, when I'm not sure a lot of people would really take him serious if China wasn't backing him.
Right.
So,
Well, because they tend to believe that he's basically a living god, right?
well, yeah, I've heard stories that, birds sang in Korean the day he was born, that he actually doesn't poop, and different things like that, So, who knows?
So you've actually seen some of these things come out while you're researching?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because I see all these crazy stories, like people are worshiping an escalator that I used in a mall. And I'm like, can this really be like this crazy? Like
that their supreme leader used.
Yeah.
And so they worship the escalator because he used it. When
hung
you were
stallion.
part of the NSA, did you have the security clearance to look up anybody's information?
No. So
Because since WikiLeaks, the reason I ask is because since the WikiLeaks, we've all learned that there were people there with security clearances that could look up any and all of our information, emails, phone calls, text messages.
well, I think this was all before the era of observing clandestinely American activity. I think traditionally the role of NSA was to monitor foreign intelligence traffic, not
Right.
American. I think all that changed in the early after 9/11, everything changed. So.
Well, and you were 1990 to 93.
So yeah, so it was early in the whole thing. So no, we didn't have any. And besides that, for me, I was just a low-level little fella, So yeah, so for me, it was very a limited point of view, but it was still inputting information. I mean, it was accessing stuff that was classified, but it wasn't like Kim Jong-un's personal
mistresses.
Yeah, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff.
Right, his coke habit.
Intricate information or whatever. Then after that, my first wife asked me kind of where I wanted to go before we decided to go our separate ways. And I went to the local library, looked up in a book of colleges, different schools, and I settled on Evergreen, which is interesting because that's kind of in the news now. Too, with all the stuff, crazy
We're
stuff.
going to have to get into that.
Yeah.
Wherever you
Evergreen.
step foot.
We didn't actually go, but their curriculum and their program is actually very interesting. It's not traditional. You basically set up contracts with the professors and the leadership, and you have a mutual kind of self-determined educational process. And at the time, that seemed really appealing. I didn't know, however, though, that their main curriculums shifted every year. So the political science curriculum that I was interested in initially wasn't offered after I got my year residency in Washington State when I moved here. I felt kind of gypped. Now I feel kind of lucky. So I applied when I was in the Army, I ended up going to school, and I ended up with 2 years of school. I went to local community colleges in Maryland. And then when I moved up here, got my year residency in order to get in-state tuition, I just transferred everything to University of Washington. And then at the time, I was working at IKEA in South Seattle there in Renton. Ended up graduating in 2001 with a degree in English with a writing emphasis, and a bachelor's degree in English and a bachelor's degree in the program's called Comparative History of Ideas, and it's sort of a comparative philosophical political ideologies kind of degree where it's multidisciplinary, where you look at, say, how does an idea, say like democracy, begin, and then how does it shift and transform through time as it approaches, say, Thomas Jefferson and the inception of the United States and the creation of, say, the Constitution. So for me, that was really fascinating because it was sort of meeting the real world, practical world with this notion of ideas and thoughts, and how do these two sort of worlds interact. Everything's based on ideas, everything's based on beliefs, we act on beliefs. So to understand how things that we sort of take for granted or are part of our lives and we never question actually came into being in the first place, looking at history, and say Plato and Plato's Republic, and how the ideas that he talks about transform over time into Thomas Paine writing Common Sense, and Thomas Jefferson and the rest creating a country based on those ideas. It's pretty interesting stuff.
And so you graduated from which college then?
University of Washington.
So from University of Washington.
Yeah, UW. And then it turned out at the end of all of that, it was just going to be English, but then talking to a counselor, they're like, you just need 12 and a half hours of do a paper. So I ended up writing this 50-page paper and making a video of existentialism, mythology, and film, and submitting that, and that was enough it was like a three-quarter course load smushed down into one quarter that ultimately got me my second degree, so that was kind of cool.
Right on. University of Washington. What year was that?
2001 is when I graduated.
Okay.
So I went there from like 95 to 2001. I took the long program. It doesn't pay well, but, it's nice being a student. It really is.
Right, yeah. So 90 to 93, you did the whole NSA thing.
Yep.
And then after that, you kind of
moved here 94, 95, and then started school in 95, and then 2001 graduated. When at the whole time working at IKEA, and then when I graduated, my wife and I decided to move to Texas because we wanted to kind of get out of here and go do something different. So when we got to Texas, I decided I really went to school for myself and for my own education. It wasn't really like one of these sort of business programs where I'm going to get a degree and then apply it to a lifestyle where I want to be like a broker or whatever. To me, it was just about getting an education, learning, and improving myself. So it wasn't really paramount to me to try to apply my degree. So when I was working at IKEA, I was working in loss prevention, and we had a situation one day where a little kid was choking on a piece of candy, and it was one of those things where you don't really know what to do. I mean, someone, you sort of learn the Heimlich maneuver or, just smack them on the back, but none of that was working. And of course, all you end up doing is calling 911, but that feeling of being sort of powerless in the face of a medical emergency.
Possible death.
Yeah, seriously, kind of awoken in me a desire to get an education and how do you handle those situations. So when I moved to Texas, I went to a local community college there, Del Mar, and I did paramedic training. So I did that for 2 years, and we did ride-outs with the fire department, and I did rotations through ER and through ICU and surgery and labor and delivery and all those sorts of things to sort of build up my medical knowledge so that if I ever faced a medical situation, I would at least have some inkling of what to do. Of course, ultimately, what anybody would do is call 911, but if you're not in a situation like that, it's a terrifying, powerless feeling when someone you love or potentially someone you love is being injured or is hurt and you don't know what to do. So I wanted to sort of fill that gap. So I did that for about 2 years, and I realized that I had acquired the knowledge and the skill base that I felt comfortable, but I didn't really want to pursue the career because it was so just negative. I mean, you're dealing with someone on the worst day of their life. I mean, And while, yeah, you're going to provide help and assistance, it's like you're still bearing the burden and an emotional just weight that it got to be too much. I mean, people abused, kids being abused, women being abused, car accidents, just all sorts of stuff. So I realized it really wasn't what I wanted to pursue. And ultimately what I was looking for in a job was a balance between sort of doing intellectual work where you have to think about what you're doing and physical work where you're using your body and your hands and that sort of stuff. And where can you sort of find that cool balance where you're doing innovative, neat, new stuff, and yet it's not so stressful that every day you're like, God, whenever that alarm goes off at the fire station, I got to roll out, and it could be a person's brain splattered across the road, or a little kid that's had cigarettes put out on him, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So after that, I was talking with my mom, and like I said, my mom was a teacher, so she's like, well, you can get teacher certification through this program that they offer, because in Texas, all the school districts are broken down into these different regions. So she's like, go to this, it's called emergency certification, and you spend a summer building a portfolio of work and classroom management, that kind of stuff, and become a teacher. So I had the degrees, I might as well go for it. So I ended up spending a summer doing this this certification for teaching, and I applied to one school, and I ended up getting it. It was Ingleside High School. Ingleside, yeah. It's a little north of Corpus Christi, which is where we were living.
And high school, you said?
And high school, yeah. So I ended up teaching my first year, and it was crazy.
Oh, for teaching. So this is after you got your degree.
Yeah. So in 2001, I got my degree, and then we moved to Texas.
Right.
So from 2001 to 2003, I was doing the EMT thing, and then from 2003 to 2007, no, 6, excuse me. So 3 to 6, I did it 3 years. I was teaching. So I taught high school. So the first year I taught, the first semester, I taught juniors and seniors. And then halfway through the year, they split the freshman class because one teacher had all the freshmen, and that was a little bit too much. So then I ended up getting half the freshman class. But as part of my teaching requirement, I had to coach. So with no experience in coaching, I ended up getting freshman girls volleyball. And you think, freshman girls volleyball, but it was awesome. It was one of the greatest experiences. We ended up being undefeated for the season, 10 out of 10 games.
Wow.
I mean, it was great. And it's like, honestly, it was almost like playing a video game where you have to do resource management. And if you're good at those sorts of games, you know exactly what I mean. This person's good at this person's good at this. All you got to do is put them in that position. You don't have to really be a great volleyball player. You just have to recognize the skill set necessary to have a great volleyball team. And I felt like I was pretty qualified to do that. And it turned out that I was right. So that first season, we were undefeated.
Were there any challenges, like when it comes to, because these are high school age girls,
14-year-old girls,
and sometimes they can get a little emotional. I mean, as any teenager can, male or female, but of course females are known to be more emotional. Like, what were the biggest challenges in coaching a high school female volleyball team?
I think honestly it was just winning the respect, and I think you win respect by giving respect. I think I think any teenager wants to be treated like an adult. And the thing that I saw, that everything they kept running up against was adults not really wanting to treat them like they were almost like peers.
Right.
And granted, you're not going to let a 14-year-old do whatever or say whatever. But there's a way to approach it that you can demonstrate that you're willing to listen, that you're willing to participate, that you have good advice, that you have their best interest at heart. So at the end, I just treated them like regular people. I wasn't a teacher. I wasn't an adult. I was just a person, and they were people. And so at the end of the day, I'd have 10 kids in my class every day, just talking about life. What does this mean? What does that mean? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And in the end, I think it worked out because, like I said, we just had the 10-year reunion, and to see those kids and where they are, it was awesome. And they're not kids anymore, of course. They're 28 years old, and it's like, Jesus, where's the time gone? But, it was amazing. And I didn't feel like 10 years had passed. It was like stepping back into that very same experience and that respect and admiration, not just in a sense, them to me, but for me to them, like being a parent. You're not a parent until the kid shows up, and the kid is the kid that